like you want. Okay. Oh, there's Paul. Okay. Should we get? Good evening. I would like to call the August 26th, 2024 New Albany Plain Local Board of Education meeting to order. Ms. Jenkins, please call the roll.
Ms. Fuller? Here. President Kalinowski?
Here.
Mr. Wilson?
Here.
Mr. Newmont is participating via Zoom. However, because he can't participate, he's not really here. He can participate in the discussion, but not considered present, and he cannot vote. And Mr. McClellan is absent.
All right, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Board members have had the opportunity to review the minutes from our July 8th, 2024 regular Board of Education meeting, as well as the minutes from our July 23rd, 2024 regular Board of Education meeting. If there are no additions or corrections, may I have a motion and a second to approve those meeting minutes, please?
Second.
Ms. Fuller and Mr. Wilson. Ms. Jenkins, please call the roll.
Ms. Fuller? Yes. Mr. Wilson?
Yes.
President Kalinowski?
Yes, and the motion carries. Superintendent Sawyers, are there any additions or corrections to tonight's agenda?
None.
With none, may I have a motion and a second to approve tonight's agenda?
So moved.
Mr. Wilson and Ms. Fuller. Ms. Jenkins, please call the roll.
Mr. Wilson? Ms.
Yes.
Fuller? Yes. President Kalinowski?
Yes, and the motion passes. And next is an opportunity for public participation, and we do not have any participants this evening, so we will move into communications to the board, beginning with a plea update from Ms. Arco.
Good evening, Superintendent Sawyers, Mrs. Jenkins, and Board of Education. Thank you, as always, for giving us the opportunity to share. Two short but sweet highlights this month. In July, Marlene Gumlock, our primary math interventionist, traveled to Houston, Texas, and she presented at the Conference for the Advancement of Mathematics Teaching. In August, she was also accepted as a teacher leader liaison for the Ohio Department of Education and Workforce. The purpose of this program is to work collaboratively with the Ohio Department of Education and Workforce and engage in two-way communications and feedback about current and future education topics. Whenever Marlene can collaborate with other teachers in any capacity, she is able to bring back new energy and ideas to her math intervention groups. And as a teacher that works directly with her, I can speak 100% to her energy that she brings to this position. Also, the high school robotics team, led by Dave Efron, set up a booth at the New Albany Farmers Market back in August, or in this month in August, and demonstrated to community members some of the STEM activities and robots that are being built in actual robotics classes. The larger 125-pound competition robot was on display, and team members were able to describe the functionality, automation, and the manufacturing that went into building the robot that took the team to the World Championships in 2024. Students designed the booth layout, they built the youth outreach activity, and they presented the competition robot to community members. The team showed how they designed a robot that finished first in regionals and qualified the team to compete in Houston, Texas, with 600 of the best teams in the world. So kudos to these teachers. Thank you very much.
Awesome, thank you. Next, our superintendent's item, Superintendent Sawyers.
President Kalinowski, members of the Board of Education, I'm going to begin this evening with a heartfelt thank you to everyone across our school campus for an incredible start to the 2024-25 school year. Last year, our first full week of school was extremely successful. Knock on wood, things are running smoothly pretty much across the entire school campus based upon all the planning and effort that goes into creating the new school year that gets finalized during the summer months. The students came back, they're smiling, they're excited for the most part. A couple here and there would rather not be at school, but for the general 90% of them plus that I've talked to, they're all excited to be back at school. Parents are happy, particularly parent drop-off lines. School buses are rolling. Mr. Kramer will talk about that in a second. But it's been a great start. Honestly, one of the smoothest starts that we've had to a school year in quite some time. With that, we're going to do a few updates before Ms. Jenkins and I do an update on the campus master plan. So I'm going to let Mrs. Lofton, the Assistant Superintendent for Teaching and Learning, talk about staffing updates first. Lori.
Thank you, Mr. Sawyers. I think I shared at the last meeting, we welcomed 25 new teachers at our new teacher orientation earlier this month, and an additional 25 new classified staff as well to our staff training. Since that time, we've continued to hire classified staff. The teachers completed our staff, so thankfully everybody was on board for the start of the school year, and continuing to work through classified staff with Ken. We have 3 or so in custodial maintenance and grounds vacancies. 2 or 3 as drivers would be great. We are staffing our buses because of the wonderful work that our team does with route specialist positions, and we're able to cover those vacancies, and Ken will talk more about that. And then we have vacancies yet in food service. We have a new EMIS coordinator starting next week. Wonderful that she's going to be coming on board, and just a couple of aid positions as well. So our team, the administrative team, has done an amazing job of getting positions filled, beating the bushes, getting high quality people in place, and we're thrilled to be in such good shape with this.
Mr. Kramer, transportation.
Thank you, Mr. Sawyers. Just a brief transportation update this evening. Currently, we have 25 in-town routes. We have 6 out-of-town routes, and we run 7 midday pre-K and kindergarten routes in the middle of the day. So just a little bit of a background on how these routes are configured and the process we go through for the first 2 to 3 weeks of the school year. We use a program called Traversa. It's our routing software. It looks at eligible students for transportation. We take out those that go to Eagles Nest and all those students at the high school that purchase a parking pass. And then we set it for 60% capacity of that bus to run a route most efficient and effective as we can to get students to school and then home again at the end of the day. Capacity of a bus is 78 students. If you're sitting 3 per seat, that's why we set it at 60%. So we average around 50 students per bus route. Obviously, at the beginning of the year, we don't always know who's going to be on the bus or who isn't. So what parent is giving a child a ride or not, or who gets transported from a daycare facility, for example. So it takes about 2 to 3 weeks for us to really figure that out. We manually move students. We might move a bus stop. We might adjust time over that 2 to 3 weeks to really narrow in to that window of between 50 and 60 students per bus route is really our target. We know in talking with Linda at Transportation, about 52 students on a high school bus is full, feels very full, and about 60 for a pre-K to 8th grade bus feels really full. So we try to stay below those numbers the best that we can. We want to thank our parents for their patience in this process. Obviously, it takes some time for us to dial this in and make sure we're getting students to school as efficiently as possible. We do want to mention that we do have an app for parents called My Ride K-12 app. It is available. There's information on our website, on our transportation page. So if you go to the main page in the upper right-hand corner, search transportation. If you scroll to the bottom of that transportation page, it'll tell you exactly how to download that app. What that app does is give you real-time information about what time your child will be picked up in the morning and what time they will be dropped off in the afternoon. So this isn't GPS tracking of a bus, but it does update in real time. So you have information so you don't need to make that call to the bus garage as we make these adjustments and changes. That's the update to transportation. As Ms. Lofton said, we are 3 bus drivers short currently, so we're always looking for good people. If you are interested in joining our team, please go to our website and click on the Work For Us button and fill out an application for us. Thank you.
And we pay for them to get their license, right?
Yeah, so every bus driver needs to get this a CDL license, background check, things like that, and we can take care of that for them.
It's a fairly rigorous process, but yes, we can help you be successful. So Mrs. Kalinowski, if you would like to drive a giant yellow taxi, we would be happy to help you.
Thank you.
Mr. Kramer, would you, just because not that people ask this question very often, but it comes up when we talk about transportation, you mentioned we have how many out-of-town routes?
Currently, we have 6 out-of-town routes.
And those go where?
So I know for some of those, Columbus Academy, St. Matthews, and Gahanna, we transport students to Ohio Dominican, to Ohio State, Columbus State. So those are some examples of schools that we go to. If students do not take that route, we do process payment in lieu of transportation to parents. For example, if you only have 2 students going to one school, we would not take a bus driver and run a route to that particular school. But for the ones I just mentioned, there's a significant amount of students going there that justifies us running a route rather than paying the road to the family.
And that is something that we are required to do by law, even though we're not transporting those students to our school to be educated here, because they live in the district and there's a certain mileage that they.
Within 30 minutes.
Within 30 minutes, excuse me, time, within 30 minutes, we are required by law to transport those students. Except in the cases of the payment in lieu of, and that would be if it was deemed just
Impractical. So again, great start to the 24-25 school year. Thank you to our students, our teachers, the teaching staff, the non-teaching staff, the administrators and our parents, and all of you for all the work that went into making this an incredible start. So we're off and running, school's full swing. As of this morning, there were 5,009 students sitting in seats. There's approximately 45 in the queue still registering. So people have discovered that school has started. So we are registering them as fast as we can, but we do have students that are waiting to come to school because their parents are just not registering them to come. So we will get them processed as fast as we possibly can. But it's exciting. My last piece this evening is Ms. Jenkins and I are going to do a campus master plan update based upon the work that's continued within the school district. So hold on just a second. Share my screen. So Ms. Jenkins and I are going to do this in 2 parts. So first, from the architects and engineers perspective, since our last Board of Education meeting, we continue to meet with the architects to go through phase 1, phase 2, the projects, and specifically proposed timelines. We are working on timelines presently related to bond issue 40 that will appear on the November 5th, 2024 ballot for our taxpayers. We reviewed the draft budget sheets this past week with Construction Council. We're expecting the updated revised versions to come from Shore Architects before the end of this week, and then that information will lead into the creation of what will become the construction manager at risk RFQ process that I'll talk about in a second. Last week, we met with the City of New Albany and NACO to review and discuss the site plan requirements for the proposed baseball and softball fields and their construction in Ganton Park. Again, Ganton Park is located behind the fire station, so that is the land that NACO will be donating to the city/school district for their construction of the baseball and softball fields based upon the construction of the new elementary school location that was selected. We're going through civil engineering. That was really the focus of the meeting, is to have conversations with NACO specifically as the current owner, specifically related to site requirements, the layout, the easement requirements, Rose Run, Creek, and everything that's adjacent to it in that area, to have some understanding of the environmental regulations that will have to be adhered to during the site plan visitation for soil borings. So after we met, they did agree that we're moving forward with the scheduled soil borings specifically in Ganton Park, so that information can start to come back to the school district as well as to the engineers and the architects. We also, in that same meeting with the city and NACO, reviewed the land donation, the site layout options, the existing site utilities, and restrictions, because there are several, related to the property itself, the intersection, the roadway, and the site egress requirements for the proposed transportation center on land that'll be donated again to the school district by NACO at the intersection of State Route 605 and New Albany Road East. So once we get through the process, the initial hurdle is going through the utility assessment with TransCanada for gas. There's a gas line that is on the property. So we have to first go through everything associated to the Trans-Canada requirements and review process, then we'll schedule soil boring specifically for that site. But until the Trans-Canada piece is finished, related to the work that the architects and civil engineers are currently doing, we will not do soil borings there. We first have to go through the utility assessment process, and they are facilitating that on our behalf. The good news is there's no fee by TransCanada to do that. So it's actually a free process to go through with them as the gas company. It was very nice. We were surprised by that because other gas companies actually charge fees. We did have a discussion with the city of New Albany regarding Swicker Woods and Swicker Woods Boulevard, specifically for the improvements and partnership opportunities for the installation of what will become a traffic signal at Swicker Woods Boulevard and Fodor Road. The traffic study that would be required to do that and looking at roadway infrastructure. We've proposed to the city that some of the improvements that have been identified through the update of the campus master plan are not just on school property, but on city-owned property because it is a roadway. So we've asked for partnership from the city to assess that. So those initial conversations are underway to determine what would be the school district's responsibility specifically and what could be potentially become the city's responsibility based on the specific improvement that would be required in that area. We did have conversations at that meeting for NACO to provide some documentation back to the architects and civil engineers related to baseball, softball, and transportation, and some of the legal documents that NACO had access to as the current owners of those properties, so that the civil engineers and the architects could go through them in preparation for what will become the future activity on those sites. We also met with construction council. So the construction council for the school district is Matt Sagoni from Squire Patton Boggs. We have used him in the past for construction work for legal counsel purposes. We did meet with him to go through the RFQ, the request for qualifications for the construction manager at risk. We reviewed the potential timeline and legal requirements for the legal notice in the Columbus Dispatch. So we actually got that back this afternoon. So that's something we now will update the timelines on within the RFQ document. We do anticipate, and it's not on here, but now that I know what I know from this afternoon's work, the RFQ likely will be finished sometime later this week. So as soon as we get the final draft, I will share that accordingly in preparation for its publication and legal notice, and that it will appear in the Columbus Dispatch. Once the RFQ is on the street, we discussed it. We did have a discussion regarding the need to start drafting the RFP. After the RFQ submission comes back, we will screen the RFQs and select most likely no more than 3 potential CMRs that would go through the interview process. To go through the interview process, they will receive requests for proposals. So there's another legal process associated with the RFP process that we talked to our attorney, Matt Sagoni, about today. The dispatch has sent back the deadline, so we did receive those today. It actually happened after this was finished. And again, the RFQ should be available later this week. Jenkins.
So ballot information, we did receive the official ballot number. It will be issue number 40 on the November ballot. And that ballot language was confirmed to match the board approved resolution to proceed. So it matches. And so that's the levy language that was in that resolution will be what you see when you go to the polls. And then again, issue 40 will appear on the November 5th, 2024 ballot for voter consideration. On the finance side, so I think everybody is aware that Everett Gallagher has graciously accepted the request to be the levy chair for the district, and he's digging into a lot of the information that we have gotten. And we had 2 sources that told us that the millage that was rolling off, that is the special assessment, is 1.95 mils. And in aggregate, that is correct. However, because of the valuation changes that just happened, individuals are paying different amounts of money, no different than the way our taxes are calculated. So Debbie's home might be paying 1.36 mils for the special assessment, and John's might be paying 2 mils. So it just depends on the individual value and how they've applied that. So where we originally thought that every taxpayer who was paying the special assessment, the community authority, see a decrease in their taxes. That's not necessarily correct now that we've dug in more and found that out. There will be an offset. Some people will see a reduction. We've done some calculations on individual homes and some properties that are just right next to each other. One might be paying 1.36 or 1.35 mils, and the property right next to it is paying 2.05 mils. So it just depends on how their values increased or decreased. So, so what we're saying then is that while the 1.95 in total is rolling off, and we are going to be asking for 1.45 mils, you may see a slight increase if you're not paying at least 1.95 mils. But we wanted to make sure we got that message out because we didn't realize that level of detail and how that changed. In the next, did you change? Yeah. So the other thing that you can do, because we've had a lot of people say, do I pay this assessment? And there are the New Albany Community Authority has a web page, and they do list a lot of neighborhoods, developments, but that's not all inclusive because we also know that there are some properties in Plain Township that are paying that assessment. Not all, I think there are 17 when we looked at the parcel list. But if you go to the website here, the New Albany Community Authority website, you can actually put in your name, your address, or your parcel number, and if that comes up, it'll tell you whether or not you're paying that assessment. And then they also have a link that you can click on to go to the Franklin County Auditor's Office website. And if you look up your property and it's not, so this is considered a special assessment. So it's not considered a tax. So you're not going to go to the tax distribution because that's where you'll see the library, the school district, the city, the township. But you would go to its tax and payments and then scroll to the bottom and you'll see whether or not that special assessment is on there, and it tells you exactly how much you're paying for that special assessment. So one of the things that we have talked about, we will likely do is post somewhere, here's how to calculate the 1.45 mils, and here's where you can go and find whether or not you're paying that special assessment. And if you are, there's the difference in whether it's an increase or a decrease. If you're not paying it, we've said all along, it will be a 1.45 mil increase or $50.75 per $100,000 of home value. But we wanted to make sure that we got this information out there and that it's not, everybody's not going to see a half mil decrease.
So just for clarification, you just said it, but for clarification again, for anyone who has not been paying the special assessment, that's the 1.45 increase.
Correct.
That would be 50, 75 per 100,000.
Correct.
So that is the
Maximum
that would be, and that would be if you are one of the minority of properties that is not in the community, the assessment community authority. So even for the vast majority of taxpayers in the district, property owners, even it will be less than the 50 per 100 because you are not going to be at that 1.45. You may be at 0.5, you may be at 0.25, you may be at minus 0.25. But I guess I just want people to understand, and I really appreciate the transparency here, particularly because it is a big thing that we've talked about, and it was a big discussion item. But I also don't want people to feel as though, oh wait, now what's going to happen here? I'm going to have this huge tax increase.
Right.
That's not the case.
We've actually done the calculation on a couple of homes, and it's maybe a $20 to $30 increase on the ones that we looked at. So it just really depends on how much of the assessment are you paying. And I will say, on the auditor's website, it does not say that your special assessment is equal to this in the way of millage. It just says this is how much money you were assessed. And so that's why we want to put out, here's how you calculate the 1.45 and take that 50.75 per 100,000, and then you subtract out what am I paying for the special assessment, and then you'll see what is the difference. But it's not a huge difference. So for most people, so if it was 1.95 and you're paying 1.36, you've got that small increase, but it is an increase. So we wanted to make sure we were open about that.
And not to get not to dive too deep into this, but the other thing that I think is good for people to think about when you're thinking about what the what a levy would cost is it's based on the assessed value of your home. So just because your home is listed, shows X number on Zillow, that's not the fair market. Yeah.
No.
So, so when you think about doing the math on this, don't think, oh, well, wait a minute, I've got X home, so that's going to be X dollars. You need to look at the auditor's site to see what your assessed value is.
Correct, yeah, absolutely. And a lot of times, the auditor's office is like slightly less than what you would see it listed for on Zillow. So I absolutely recommend going to the county auditor's office or website, because that's what they're basing it on.
And a big thank you to Everett, who worked diligently to help us work through this math problem.
Absolutely. Yeah, he's really digging in, asking really great questions, and covering something that we did not see.
Any questions related to the campus master plan update that Becky or I can answer? Making progress.
Yeah.
The legal stuff's slow and steady, so people just have to understand that. I mean, it's going to take some time to get through it all, but we're working on it. I know everyone wants answers. I get questions all the time about timeline. We're working on it, so soon.
You know when approximately you think you'll get RFPs back from architects?
RFQs are first.
Okay.
So there's a 30-day public posting requirement under the law. So that's the legal advertisement piece. So we have to give them at least 30 days once we publish the document to have the right to respond. So that will start the first clock. So once we post it, it's 30 days after that to receive the RFQ. From that process, and we'll come up with a timeline associated to it, we have to review the qualifications that are submitted to identify those firms that we would like to invite to become recipients of the RFP process. And then there's another time clock that starts again.
Depending on the number.
30 days?
Yes, so our goal right now would be hopefully by your November 15th, that's what we're working backwards from, your November 15th, 2024 board meeting. We would actually hopefully be able to recommend the contracts both for A&E, for architectural and engineering design, and the CMR. So we would fulfill that process that we have to go through to get us to November 15th. So that is what we're working on right now with board council, is beginning with November 15th as the goal that we would actually issue contracts, work backwards.
And depending on the number of firms that would respond to the RFQ, not all of them would be invited to do the RFP. So there would be a scoring process to narrow that down so that then you have a more focused group of firms to do the RFP.
And who will screen those?
We will be talking to you about that soon.
Okay.
So we're getting into that detail now with the legal counsel. So there will be board participation likely.
No more than 2.
That's at your next meeting.
Okay.
So
It's a teaser.
one day at a time, Mrs. Kalinowski.
Yeah, it's exciting though.
Any other questions we can answer about campus master plan updates? Again, the timeline question I'm getting a lot. I'm just asking people to be patient. We are trying to work through that process with the architects, but it takes a little bit of time. And part of these decisions are outstanding based upon the partnerships with our partners and what we have to learn about the land that's being donated to the school district.
So we can't get too ahead of ourselves because we have to
And we have to pass a bond.
the money to pay for
So
this
we have
before
to
we get too
pay
ahead of
for
it.
it before we go, because I'm also asking, when are we going to design? After the bond passes in November, we would start the design process, but that process does not start until we actually have the money to fund the project. It's a process. Exciting.
Yep.
Okay, next I want to welcome Greg Taylor, Director of Assessment and Accountability, to the podium. He and I are going to go through the 2023-24 local report card preliminary results from the Ohio Department of Education and Workforce. Greg's going to do that. And then I'm going to talk about the 2023-24, 2024-25 continuous improvement plan. So we're going to kind of marry these two presentations together because they're so interrelated with each other. But we're going to start first with the data piece for accountability purposes to celebrate the 2023-24 preliminary information, and then how that applied to our CIP goals, to then look towards the 2024-25 school year. So Greg, this should be coming up.
Awesome, thanks for having me. Like Michael said, I'll be reviewing the preliminary report card results. I'm the new Director of Assessment and Accountability, began on October 1st, so I'm excited to present this to the board as my first presentation. Today we'll go over our purpose, which you just saw on the other slide. The purpose of the Ohio local report cards, and then we'll look at our preliminary results. After that, Mike will take over and talk about CIP. As you know, our purpose is to create a culture of accountability that achieves the best academic and developmental outcomes for each student. And how that fits into the report card is, the report card measures the progress and academic achievement and how we prepare our students for the future. The achievement data used includes the results from state tests given in the spring for grades 3-8, and then high school end of course exams for specific courses. It provides a snapshot of school and district performance at a singular point in time, so that's an important grade measure. The 2023-2024 results are not yet finalized. There are some elements that we know are not going to change, but the final results will be released on September 12th to the public by the Ohio Department of Education and Workforce. So House Bill 82, which was passed in June of 21 by the 134th General Assembly, had some major report card reforms that included changing the grading system from a letter system to a star system. So instead of an A through F, districts and schools' overall performance and performance on these components are now measured in stars 1 to 5. Each component will be rated 1 to 5 as a whole star, and then overall ratings for schools and districts can receive half stars. So they range from 5 stars, significantly exceed state standards, 3 stars, which is the meeting standards, and then 1 star needs significant support, meets standards. So here's the exciting part. Here are our preliminary results. So currently as it sits, we are looking at a 5-star overall rating, which is outstanding, with 5 stars in all of the components that are currently available. So our achievement is a 5-star, well beyond just the minimum threshold. Gap closing, same thing, well beyond the minimum threshold. Graduation, same thing, and early literacy as well. The progress component is the final thing that gets released. So we will get a grade on that one, but we're not going to know until only a few days before it's publicly released, and then it'll be publicly released on September 12th. The college, career, workforce, and military readiness component, which I'll have fun saying later. The ratings will not be available this year. They are expected to be released next year. So as I said, for achievement, we do have a performance index over 90%, which is the threshold for a 5-star. We currently sit and are expected to stay at 95.6%. That's outstanding. Our gap closing, some of the highlights there are that all of our student subgroups are meeting the state's goals, the short-term goals, the PI, and also they're doing the same in graduation this year. Progress, TBD, and then graduation rate, 5 stars continues to be a very successful measure for us. And then early literacy is also 5 stars, and that is, as a reminder, measures the reading improvement, proficiency, and also promotion for the 4th grade. So we look at our achievement ratings. I want to remind you what performance index is and how it's calculated now. The performance index is a measure using every student's individual test result, weighting the result based on performance level. So proficient score counts as 1, an advanced score counts as 1.2, and then a basic limited scores are below 1. And then that is divided by the number of tests, which gets you a raw performance index. New in last year's report card, the new reform report card, the maximum PI, so our denominator, is now established at a yearly basis, and it's based on the average of the top 2% of districts or schools, their PIs. So I believe Schools this year is 110.4 something, and then districts are at a little slightly lower at 109.261, I think. Looking specifically at our performance levels and our performance index, we're doing a great job. We do not have many students who are at the limited and basic levels, and we have a great proportion of students at the higher levels. Over time, this is the same or very similar within a 0.1 percentage point as previous year's data. And our performance index is very similar to previous years as well. The performance index percent is down slightly because the max went up slightly. Looking at our performance index over time.
The max PI went up slightly.
It did, very slightly, yeah. Our PI over time is, we're 0.2 lower than we were last year, but we're still very high. In 2019, before COVID, we were at 106. An important thing to note about pre-2002 report card reform is that the PI for districts and schools did not include end of course exams in biology or other sciences, and then the history subjects, the social studies. So those have been added beginning in 2022. Looking at our individual proficiency levels, we'll take a look at the primary school first. Our data is slightly up in grade 3 math and slightly up in grade 3 ELA, but we're still below our pre-pandemic levels in grade 3 math. At the intermediate building, we see higher performance in grade 4 ELA, grade 5 ELA, and grade 6 ELA compared to last year, and grade 4 math, grade 5 ELA, and grade 6 ELA are performing at a higher level than our students were in 2006 or 2019. So we did see some minor losses in some categories, but as we know, there are different cohorts of students with different backgrounds and demographics, so it's not exactly an apples to apples comparison year over year. So we're going to keep that in mind. At the middle school level, we did see a really great improvement in 8th grade math. Scores were steady in 8th grade ELA, and we saw some reductions in our 7th grade math and 7th grade ELA and 8th grade science. Specifically with the science, I think that it's important to keep the cohort mindset in mind that we haven't seen their science scores up until last time we saw them was in 5th grade. So it's been a while. For end of course assessments, and I should add that this is not by high school, middle school, intermediate school. So if we have students who are accelerated or gifted taking a higher level test, they will show on the building above, or on the slide for the building above. For end of course assessments, we saw some increases in algebra, ELA2 and biology. We saw some decreases, pretty minor decreases in our social studies numbers, to be honest. And then we are still above pre-pandemic levels in algebra 1. So that is achieved data. If anyone has any questions, let me know.
Before you go on, we got closing.
Yeah.
I think we've talked about this previously, Mr. Sawyers. But we, in addition to looking at these end of course, these year, we back up. Because we have, it's not one thing that's necessary to look at 7th grade math this year from 7th grade math last year, because it's a completely different group of kids.
You cannot do that.
Can't do that.
You have to look at the cohort.
Yes.
So look at the preceding year's grade level result.
Yes.
And now advance them 1 year
Yes.
to the next grade level. And it gets complicated when you transition, typically at the middle school, because you could be transitioning into a high school end of course that's not going to appear in the same grade level.
Right.
So the denominator could change based upon the number of students that are moving in that specific cohort.
Right. So we're
looking
tracking
at
that.
the cohort, correct?
Yeah.
To understand what their success and opportunity may be, using that as an example. So if you look at the previous one on, I'll just use middle school math. to illustrate your point. So if you look at the 7th grade math number in 22-23 was 84.1. Now advance them into 8th grade math, it's at 88.4. So the question becomes, what percentage of those students, when you actually look at the student names, are still in that cohort, either in the school district or went to a different course because they did not take 8th grade math this year? They might have taken Algebra 1. Right. As an example. But that's the cohort logic. You're right. So we have to, and we do analyze that data at the building level to understand grade by grade what's specifically happening with that student.
Yeah.
And that's where the growth data that comes out in September, because we don't have that yet, is to understand how much growth did that student make. Because even with, and Greg talked about limited and basic, there's a difference in the school district if you're, I'm just going to say, a lifer that you started with us versus you moved in. So if you moved in, how are we wrapping services around you to ensure that we can get you at least a year's worth of growth or more? That's the September data that we wait for to come back and look at the impact of what the instructional environment and support services and intervention services or enrichment services had for that specific student. That's the last piece of the data that always comes in September. But it's a giant puzzle, and trust me, teachers analyze this at the building level with their building administrators, Mr. Emery and Dr. Ramias, specifically to go through and understand where are our successes and what constituted that success, what did we do, and in September we'll have teacher value added data as well to understand that if a teacher did an outstanding job in a specific area, it's making that to become a safe conversation to understand. What was your methodology? What's your pedagogical impact within the classroom? What did you do that resulted in this level of growth for kids? That's the last prong that will come.
Yeah.
And not to interrupt this for too long, but we aren't just checking in at end of course.
No.
So there's checkpoints throughout the
There's
year.
formative and summative assessments that happen throughout the school year. We also do other forms of standardized assessment using MAP. So right now we're in 2 weeks of a testing cycle within the school district. We just started that today across the school district, looking at NWEA MAP and understanding that as well to compare and contrast for kids. So teachers have current information to also incorporate it into the classroom environment to individually meet the needs of that child.
And I frequently get feedback about how much testing goes on, and you know, this is the reason for the testing. It's not for the sake of testing. It's to help kids where they need help and accelerate them where they can be accelerated and track them throughout the year so that they're getting as much as possible in a school year.
We want evidence of growth. That's our expectation. And what are we doing to ensure that you have a plan that's put in place that allows you to learn, achieve, and grow every day? And it's not the same for every child. That's the hardest part of the teachers to figure that out and understand, but we have to give them the data to arm them with the data that's necessary to support that child to understand what to do within the classroom, because it's not a one size fits all. It's hard, but the data helps inform that practice.
Next component is gap closing. I'll go through each of the tiles on the next pages, but I do want to highlight that the gap closing measure is assessing the district's ability to close the achievement gap, move students, so grow students in different subgroups, and then look at graduation rate gaps as well. We have an 89.1%, which is a very high 5-star. The 5-star threshold is 60%, so we are very easily meeting it. The tiles there that are outlined in red, those are the progress component data that will have in September. That'll populate into here, so it may adjust the percentage a little bit up or down. The first one is our gap closing for our gifted students. So our value added data is not there yet, but I did put in the performance index, which is a 121.028. And that ends up being a 99.9% of the possible performance index max, which means that we were in the top 2% essentially. So when that data is released, it'll show us that we are in the top 2% for our gifted students. And we met the indicator. The indicator this year is 97.5%. The gifted inputs, which is the service and identification, it remains the same as last year, which is a 68.56%. We did not meet that. We identified the issue last year. Well, we identified it to correct this year. We had an issue with our visual and performing arts screening for gifted students. So we have remedied that for this upcoming year, and we expect that that'll be met. 80% is the threshold for 2024 and on. They phased it in.
What exactly does that mean?
Which part?
What the visual arts, performing arts?
So you're required to screen for different fields of giftedness. Yeah, so superior cog, subject area,
Right.
visual and performing arts. So we have a program now to screen for visual and performing arts, so that should raise our threshold.
What is visual and performing arts?
It's being gifted at the arts and music and dance and many
All fine
elements.
art
Yep, all the fine arts.
Okay.
But you have to go through a formalized assessment
Yes.
that's approved in order to identify students as gifted within that area. So you can't come in and say, look at my beautiful painting, I'm gifted. That's not the standard. So you have a standard that you have to meet for threshold, and it has to be uniform for the assessment. So that's now being implemented in the school district. So we believe this will change this area from being not met to met, because we now have implemented a way from a rubric perspective to identify giftedness in the visual arts,
And
performing
is
arts.
the rubric common across all school districts?
There are options available. Lori, you want to talk about it?
Sure. So President Kalinowski, last year, Katie Nowak, Scott Emery, Jasmine Myers, Sheila Saunders, and I spent a lot of time working through this. Katie was asking other districts what they're using. It's more of an, there's not a standardized assessment you can do as with giftedness in English or math or science the same way. So she worked through with what other districts were doing, and we made a determination that we could implement something that wasn't too complex, too time consuming for students, and we will be putting that in place. Of course, because Greg is new, we're, he doesn't have a lot of that information. Katie shared that, it's in place, it's ready to go.
Seems like that one would be maybe more subjective.
We are trying our best to make it not be subjective, as are all other districts. That's why it takes longer to get it kind of in place and make it meaningful.
So in English language arts, as I mentioned on one of the first slides, all of our student subgroups have met the state short-term goal. We still are seeing improvement. If you look from 2021 to 2024, for each subgroup is going up as compared to 2021. So we are seeing an upward trajectory for all student groups, which is great. We do still see gaps between the all students line, which is the red line, and some of our other at-risk groups like economically disadvantaged students, English learners, and students with disabilities down there towards the bottom.
The subgroups are identified by the state, not by us. So that state actually dictates which subgroups get identified specifically in your data assessment.
It's important to note that students can count in multiple categories here. So a kid could be double counted. If you have a white student with disabilities, they would count in the all students category, the white category, and then the students with disabilities category. So that's a theme throughout all of this data. In math, we're seeing a similar upward trajectory. There were some bumps in the road in 2023, but it's still upward since 2021 with similar trends on the same student groups with the largest gaps between all students. But again, all the student groups met the short-term state goal again this year, so that's great. Graduation rate. Last year, not all of our subgroups met. We had certain subgroups that you saw took a dip in 2023. This is graduation data. So while the report card line at the bottom, that's the report card year. Remember that graduation data is using the previous year's cohort. So in 2022, when we saw that drop, it was students in the 2023 that we saw the drop. It was students in the 2022 cohort. So we'll be monitoring that.
The graduation rate is, you start here.
As a ninth grader, when you enroll to the school district, we are responsible to see you graduate when you are a senior. If you move out, you count against us. And the state is not interested in changing this despite all the complaining that happens related to it. It is to deaf ears. You are responsible for every student when they begin ninth grade. And if they move and go to Gahanna next door, we're still dinged for that student not walking across the commencement stage.
That's interesting. It doesn't follow if they graduate from somewhere.
We fought this for years. It has not changed.
That's Ohio Department of Education Workforce Policy.
ODEW.
It's our English learner data. So although it's sometimes referenced as progress data, it uses spring assessment data and not projections through value added. So it's a little different than the other progress components. This measures the amount of students who are either proficient on the English learning, the OELPA, or who have met their growth goal. So OELPA is administered through to all English learners in grades kindergarten through 12. The first time they take the assessment, a growth goal is met for every year. You're supposed to improve your overall point by 2 if you were at this rate, or 3 if you were at another rate. So that's what this is, either proficient or meeting that goal. The proficient, we had 160 students last year who were included in this metric. 58 of them were proficient. And then 66.3 students met their growth goal. And what that accounts to is an overall rating of us meeting our growth goal again. And I will like to note again that our English learner population is growing, increased 50 in the past couple of years of accountable students. We have new students who come in weekly who are being assessed and could enter into this as well. The last element of the gap closing component is chronic absenteeism. I know last year there was a discussion about it being a problem statewide, and it is. I was working at the state when it became a huge state problem. Our rates have gone down, so we're the blue line up there. The green line is the state goal, so we've met the state goal every year, except for that year it was not rated. And then the state average is the red line. We've improved. 2 years ago, we were at 15.3. Last year, we improved to 10.2, and now we're down slightly to 8.8. It continues to be something that I've been looking at in my first few days with buildings and trying to brainstorm how we can get students and emphasize the importance to students and parents of being at school, because anytime you're not at school, this counts. You're counting towards chronic absenteeism. So even excused absences, you're not at school, you're not receiving instruction. That's what this is.
And do tardies count toward this as well?
So tardies can count towards it by the hourly metric, yeah.
And last year, we put more robust processes in place.
Correct. It's an everyday improvement opportunity, but to where Greg went, this has a direct impact on everything else, because if you're not here to receive the instructional benefits to participate in the classroom, then we can't expect that your performance levels are going to demonstrate what we would expect as a school district. So we're not back to pre-pandemic. I will tell you 8.8%. When I talk to other superintendents, they're like, well, if I had that, it would be a celebration. Well, to us, it's still an opportunity for improvement, because we want to basically continue to decrease this to be pre-pandemic levels. Even honestly, before pre-pandemic, 5% was a high number for us, because we want students to come to school. But there are, to President Kalinowski's question, there's a lot of work that's done at the building level by the building administrators and our school counselors and our teachers, specifically in chronic absenteeism, because we try to focus on students that aren't coming to school, to try to understand why aren't you coming to school, and what can we do to support you to get you to come to school to be successful at school. But life does happen, and we have to work through that with students district-wide and their families.
Can you remind me what the chronic absenteeism rate or number of days is? Is there a threshold?
Yeah, it's 10% of the instructional time. So it's based on hours.
Based on hours.
Yeah, but I mean, it can translate into, I don't know how it, not there yet, but 17-ish days.
Okay.
It's approximately 17 days in total, but everything at the state right now is calculated in hours.
Okay. Do we have any sense of, are there, within that 8.8% or prior years, are there typical reasons that either students cite or we determine are the causes for their absenteeism? I hear anecdotally about parents that might take their children out of school trips or things like that. So those are, as I would understand it, when we are aware of them, they're unexcused absences. So unexcused absence would
Contribute towards your absentee rate.
to this.
Yes. Dr. Russell, you're in the audience. Would you like to share anything else from a high school perspective? So like, what are the 3 top reasons you hear related to absenteeism at the high school? So if you have the podium, so you're on the microphone. The speaker, you're close, but
Yeah.
it'll be safe when you're at the podium because I know.
Am I good? Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Hey, everybody. So some of the reasons that our students are absent from school, they fill out like a pre-planned absence form. We have a lot of students that are going on college trips. They go on some vacations during the school year. So those are pre-approved absences, but those hours that students are gone still count. So while those students are healthy and doing things and engaging in things that are, outside of the school, the hours that they miss in their seat time still count towards this metric. So, it's our responsibility as a high school to make sure we communicate with our community, our parents, that they're aware of how this is calculated. So, while we want students to go and have experiences, we also want them learning at school. So it's the line that we draw in the conversations that we have to support our kids.
Do the college visits count toward this?
Yes.
Because you're not at school.
And again, from our end, we want our kids there. Like, we want students to go and explore. So this is it's a dynamic that exists with a metric that we have. So, in that particular situation, it is what it is because it's how it's measured. From another perspective, chronically absent students, some of the interventions that we're putting in place, like right now at the high school, we're identifying who's been here, who hasn't, and our counselors are communicating with families. So, all of our intervention pieces start immediately when school starts to try to build a relationship with the student and the family to make sure they're at school. If we don't know why they're not there, that's when we need to reach out to try to understand that. And our families are great partners in trying to understand these situations, trying to make sure our students are in school. But that's the biggest piece. What can we do to help to make sure students are in? And obviously, we're going to have illness and we don't want students to come to school and they're sick, and we've communicated those pieces. But, for us to continue to reduce this metric, it takes our entire learning community to do so.
So the biggest opportunity for reducing chronic absenteeism sounds like it's in the category of, not necessarily in the category of parents who are taking them out to do trips, college visits, or other developmental programs, but in students whose reasons for chronic absenteeism can vary greatly.
Yes, so, we'll have students, and we're noticing patterns right now or trends where, students have missed 2 and 3 days in a row, and that triggers communication from our teachers because they're marking students present or absent, letting us know, hey, so-and-so hasn't been here. And we're trying to be as proactive as we can and making sure we make contact and communication. From there, we have, as you all may know, we have our next period at the high school. It's a 15-minute block, non-academic time, where we focus on if a student has missed a specific number of days, talking and communicating with that teacher to connect with that child when they're in school. Because we all know the reason kids come to school, students come to school to learn, but it's the relationships that they build when they're in the space. So it's our responsibility to build that relationship and create a space where those kids want to be. And that's what we try to do when we have them, within the walls of the school.
Team effort. But we need you to come to school. Thank you, Dr. Rosa.
Thank you.
Mr. Taylor.
Our next component is graduation. Like I said, this is a strong area for the district. We do a great job of graduating our students on time. And nothing's changed this year. We are at a 98.5% for our 4-year graduation rate. So that's high five again for high 5 stars. The next component is the early literacy component. This component is measured in 3 different areas, and it's measuring how proficient our students are on the third grade assessment, how well we do at moving students fall to fall diagnostic from off track to on track, and then our promotion of students to fourth grade. And each of those measures is weighted differently. That goes into the overall percent score. So we have a 94.2%. Again, that is a high 88% is the threshold for a 5-star. 90.9% of our students are proficient on the reading portion of the ELA proficiency test. I'm not sure why the state still calls it just ELA on the report card because it's just the reading portion. For improving literacy, that's our movement from off track to on track. We're doing a good job at that as well, 74.8%. And then obviously 100% promotion, meeting the promotion requirements is outstanding. The final component is the college, career, workforce readiness, military readiness, told you I'd mess it up, component. CCWMR is what we called it when I worked at ODU, because it's a mouthful. This component is replacing the prepare for success component from the previous report card model, and the stars should be released in 2025. The department is working on those thresholds for star rankings. They might push it back a little bit if they need to. But essentially what goes into the score, the numerator is the count of the students demonstrating readiness in a number of ways, which I'll show you on the next page, divided by the total number of students in that 4-year graduation cohort. That spits out a percentage score, and that's our component score for this component. So even though it's not rated yet, they still are going to publish all the data for it like it is rated. Our percentage this year is going to be 76.3, which is up from previous years. The graph next to it shows the numerator and the denominator in blue and red, and then the percent score that we would have reached if it were rated by year. So we are on an upward trajectory. When they do come out with stars, I fully expect that this will be bar high 5 again. If you look at previous year's data, our data is in 10% of districts, so that should be high 5s. So I mentioned the specific ways that students can demonstrate readiness for this measure. This graph is showing over the past 3 years how students are meeting those. And again, students can count in more than one of these bars, but they'll only count once in the numerator data. There's no bonus like there was in some of the older versions. The vast majority of our students, nearly 90% of the students who are meeting the requirement are meeting it through the SAT or ACT remediation free score. Since we administer SAT in junior year, students who get 480 on the English part and 540 or 580 on the math part, then get the check mark and they have met their remediation free score. They can also do that on the ACT or SAT weekend national tests. The next area is the honors diploma. So we do have a high percentage of students who are meeting the honors diploma requirements. And we grant them the honors diploma, and that triggers this as well. We have a large number of students who are also scoring 3 or higher on 3 different AP assessments throughout their 4 years in high school. That triggers them for that category. Students who score 12 points or greater on the industry recognized credential assessments or get a state industry credential license also trigger as a numerator. And then the last 3 are lesser utilized, but I wanted to include them because we are seeing students who are using those. So that's the 12 or more CCP credits, the proficient on a technical assessment, and then the Ohio Beach Jobs Readiness Seal, plus the 250 hours of a work-based learning opportunity. As part of this component, there's also going to be some report-only portions of this that are going to be put on the report card that are not going into the measure, but the general public, community, and district will have for information. This includes the percent of students who are enrolling in college, what kind of college they're enrolling, 2 or 4 year, if they're gainfully employed, which is a little flawed right now at the state level because it's based on a graduation follow-up survey, and there's no definition yet for what gainful employment is. They're working on that. Military enlistment, apprenticeship, other college enrollment also triggers this. And other college enrollment is a very small number of institutions who grant degrees but are not classified as a 2 or 4 year college specifically by the U.S. Department of Education, federal. So as you can see, the majority of our students are enrolling in 2 or 4 year colleges. So that's up. We're at 92.4% in the 2023 year, which would be the 2022 cohort. And this year, 87.6. The majority of those students are enrolling at 4-year universities.
I'm struggling with how to understand what the 76.3 actually means. If I was taking a quick glance at it, it means, and I know this isn't the case, that roughly 24% of our measured students are not prepared for either college, career, workforce, or the military.
As deemed by the requirements that the Department of Education has put forth, they do not fit into one of the categories yet that deems them successful 1 year after graduation. It does not mean that the next year they will not meet one of these pathways, but for the reporting on this, it's just within 1 year.
And that's based on their survey results.
It's based on their survey results and some National Student Clearinghouse data that pre-populates those survey results now. So that's where we're getting the college enrollment data. The military enlistment data comes through West Point now, and is also pre-populated, but everything else is based on survey data.
So one of the challenges, Mr. Wilson, to your point, is we had great difficulty getting access to students to take the survey. So when the student graduated in the previous cohort, as an example, we emailed the parent, because that's the contact information we had, and asked the parent to contact their former student, now our alum, to ask them to fill out the survey. This past year, we actually made it part of the exit survey at the high school to try to have students tell us the personal email that they would be using so that they could receive the survey directly beyond just their parent. So that's also, to Greg's point, one of the flaws of the system is it's based upon you filling out the survey. So if you won't complete the survey, we don't have any data for you. We can't, there's no requirement to make you take the survey.
Sure.
So we asked for them to do it because now we're going to be accountable for it. So we're trying to build systems into the exit process when the kids leave their senior year to remind them so that we can send them communications. And I'll just say, like, as an example for Dr. Russell, inviting them to participate so that they can share their experiences when they were here at New Albany High School. So there's some personalized approach to it, and just getting the cold email from the state that might go to your spam file that you pay no attention to. But it is survey-based.
Yeah, because if you look at our graduation rate, one would say that if we're graduating students at that rate, that they are prepared for all of those.
But, and I would also say, it doesn't mean there's not opportunities. So you'll actually see that when we go through the CIP conversation, that we've selected 2 of these specifically to try to target within the continuous improvement plan as an opportunity to educate and help build people's knowledge base and understanding for what's coming next in graduation requirements. So I'll talk about that.
This is perhaps a loaded question, but what effect do you think an active alumni association would have on tracking that kind of
It
information?
probably would help a lot.
So as we move forward, we highlight our achievements. We already highlighted them, but our student achievement is very high. Our graduation component stays high, and our subgroups are all meeting the goals. Our focus areas are that we're going to continue our increased levels of intervention in reading, writing, and have a support or have an emphasis on the intervention in math as well. So as we look at our school level highlights, starting with the primary school, we only have 3rd graders, so all this data is just for 1 grade. They have a 5-star achievement with a high performance index, 95.8%. They met their gifted performance index threshold. Their gap closing score is currently at 100%, which is outstanding. And they improved their early literacy score from a 4-star rating last year to a 5-star rating this year. So they're projected to have an overall rating of 5 stars. So that's awesome.
I want to pause here for a second, just because, I mean, I know this is the measure that applies to the primary school technically, but it's really the cumulative impact of what starts as early as preschool through third grade and everything that happens in early literacy that Mrs. Smith, Ms. Libero, and Mr. Emery do with our classroom teachers. Candidly, and she's sitting there, because this was a huge celebration for us. This is the first year since the change in the report card that the primary school received 5 stars. And again, it's 5 stars, not just to the primary school, but I would tell you it applies to the ELC and every teacher in the K through 3 band that does this work specifically for those building blocks that are necessary. But this was a celebration because this is something that Mrs. Smith, Ms. Libero, Mr. Emery have spent quality time on looking at specifically for literacy in our school district to figure out what else can we do to support our youngest early developing readers and what we specifically do in literacy. So this is a great celebration at the primary and ELC world for everything that happens in our classrooms every day by our teachers working with their building admin. So kudos to all of you for this achievement.
Awesome, thank you.
At the intermediate, you'll see a theme in here. We'll see a lot of 5s. So that's great news. Achievement at the intermediate is also 5 stars, and they are also above 95% of the performance index. Their gifted performance index is a 99.2, which again is likely that they're in the top 2% again. The gap closing, very high 5 stars, which will produce a 5-star overall rating again.
Again, another wonderful celebration for Mrs. Ballinger and everyone at the intermediate school with Mr. Emery as the director of elementary ed. You can see the cumulative impact.
At the middle school, achievement, another high 5-star, 95.5% PI. Gifted, they met, and in particular, the performance index for the middle school is a 101.2%, which means that they are very likely in the top dozen or less schools. So we'll look at that data when it comes out, and you can celebrate it now because the data suggests it. It's very huge. Gap closing, they also had a great gap closing component score, 5 stars, and that also produces, again, a 5-star overall rating.
Mr. Freeman had the lead, but congratulations to the middle school and Dr. Mamias.
At the high school, 5 stars in achievement again, 92%. It's a great job. In gifted, they just missed out on the threshold. They have a 96.9%. The threshold is a 97.5. Still worth celebrating. Gap closing component, again, 5 stars. Graduation, I put the 4 and 5 year rates in here. 5 stars again, very high 5 stars. College career readiness measure, although it's not rated, still producing great results and data that we are seeing. So when it is rated, I anticipate that being another excellent highlight. And that all produces, again, a 5-star for our district or for the high school.
You can see the high school finished the theme of the 5-star ratings. Congratulations to Mr. Kramer, former high school principal, Dr. Russell, current, and the entire team at the high school with all our faculty and staff. It is a huge celebration. So there's a lot of work in this data. I mean, these results just do not instantly happen. So we're confident when we see the data finally on September 12th. We will be one of the highest achieving school districts in the state still. We don't know what the magic number is, but we anticipate with the progress data coming out that we should receive 5 stars. So we'll be one of the few school districts again this year. It's one of blank that met 5 stars on all components plus the 5-star overall rating. So we have the highest level possible. I would tell you from a PI perspective, we're at 5.5 stars because of what we scored. You just don't go above 5. So you only get the half stars below 5. I think we should get the half star. So we've earned it.
So before we move into the continuous improvement plan with Superintendent Sawyers, are there any more questions on the report card data?
If a parent were downloading this report from the website or from the meeting minutes, how do they use all this information?
At this point, it is informative, and it's a preview of what's to come.
I should have.
So I would tell you there's a
Don't frame
parent.
that better. Like, what resources are there for a parent to say, okay, this is how I use this report?
Yeah, there are resources on the Department of Education website that are updated yearly. They are not updated yet because the report cards aren't out. However, many of the thresholds and the guidance that's in all of the current documentation will remain the same. So parents will be able to look component by component and even like the measures within a component, the indicators or the measures within a component, what they mean, and kind of walk themselves through this if they wanted to.
And I would tell you more importantly for the parent is the parent guide to your student's results. You actually get a report that is individualized to your student that explains to you, this is what Billy does extremely well, and here's an opportunity for Billy. So like when you go through and you look at specifically what's in the data, there's actually a very user-friendly report that we mail to the family when we receive the results back from the state that helps you understand and unpack what is the data telling you so that you can understand how to partner with us as a school district to help meet that child's needs. All right, so we're going to transition to the continuous improvement plan benchmarks.
Michael, before you move on, I just want to take a moment. I do think that it's really important to celebrate our success. I mean, this is really incredible results again. And I want to just recognize that it is hard to achieve this. And, you know, in my remarks at convocation, I wanted to share my perspective that I know, we don't take it for granted as a board that these results are just going to come every year. It takes a lot of hard work and collaboration and leadership and looking at individual students all the time and how to move them forward. And this team has just done a remarkable job. So I do hope you celebrate it. And you know, it's so easy to move on to, okay, here's our objectives for next year. But I hope you really breathe in the success of these results and internalize them and feel so proud of them. So just a big thank you.
Okay, that's good. Okay, continuous improvement plan. So we adopt annual benchmarks as the Board of Education Administration. The Board of Education's previously defined a commitment to excellence. The Novalee Plain Local School District is committed to creating a culture of accountability to achieve the best academic development outcomes for each student, and that we aspire to become and remain the best rated public school district in the state of Ohio. So although they're no longer rankings, we do receive the star ratings because that's now what's available from the Ohio Department of Education and Workforce. Greg talked about on the local report card the star ratings back to the reference I gave. So it is not a ranking. It is actually ratings that are issued by the state. We fully anticipate we will be a 5-star school district. So these are preliminary results. We do anticipate that when the progress component is released in September, that it will include the 5 stars. So that is the last metric that becomes available because it is individual growth to illustrate from what used to be value added. To specifically look at the growth metrics for each individual student. So that performance data is the last piece to come because there is so much associated to it. That will come in September. This past year, you set benchmark goals. So benchmark number 1 was to increase achievement. So this is to earn the district performance index result of 95% or greater on the local report card. As Greg had said, our local report card results this year for the permanent improvement index score was 95.6. This will be met. We qualify to say it's still preliminary as of August 26, 2024. We do not expect this to change in any way, shape, or form when the results come out from the department, but nothing is official until it is released by the Ohio Department of Education and Workforce. Benchmark number 1 is also the academic achievement stipend within the school district. So this is the one contractually that we put a benefit in place based upon performance within the school district to basically demonstrate as a team that we're coming together to basically serve the academic and developmental needs of students every single day that result in outstanding academic achievement for kids. So this is the benchmark goal that's established that we receive input on from both the teachers and the non-teaching association and the school district for the board that you will establish as the academic goal for the 2024-25 school year, just like you did for 2023-24. By September 30th. So then we release it to the staff so everyone understands what is our goal this year. And as you see, I am proposing that it stays at 95%. As President Kalinowski said, and as the faculty and staff in our school district fully understand with our administration, this is not easy. We've set a bar that 90% in the state is equal to 5 stars. 95% in my calculation using their metric is 5.5 stars. We set a very high bar for what we expect to demonstrate daily on academic achievement throughout our organization. Our teachers and our administrators and our support staff, non-teachers, and everyone that's involved in the process to do this thing called school, all 700 plus employees that work here, come here every single day, regardless of their job classification and service to children. They contribute to this goal, and we recognize that through the academic achievement stipend. Although this bar is high, I believe is achievable. And as long as I believe is it achievable, that's my recommendation when we talk about this with the faculty, administration, and staff, that we have to stretch ourselves. I get the cohort changes every single year, and there's risk associated to it, but we've demonstrated as a team with the right academic intervention and enrichment supports put in place, focusing both on academic and developmental needs, we have the capacity to fulfill this goal. So as long as we believe we can, we will. And I believe we can and we will achieve it at least 95% or greater for the 2024-25 school year. Therefore, I'm recommending, as the superintendent, that the benchmark stays. It's not easy, as you heard tonight. It's hard, but we can do it. Benchmark number 2 is to facilitate a year's worth of growth for every year of instruction. So this is the progress metric that's not available yet. This is to be determined in September. Right now, I'm proposing it stays the same as far as the draft goal for 2024-25 until we actually see what it says. So right now, this is a TBD for me. This will be easy for us to come back and revisit once I see the data, but we don't know what it says yet. So I'm just telling you for right now, let's wait till the data comes and I can tell you in September what the final recommendation is. Obviously, I will talk to you before that when I get the information, but right now, for public purposes, I'm recommending it stays the same because I don't know what it is. Benchmark number 3 is meet or exceed the state's gap closing standards identified for subgroups. So again, the subgroups are identified by the state of Ohio through the Ohio Department of Education and Workforce. We set a goal of to be at least 4 stars. Actually, Greg, I think this one's been met already, correct? So the to be determined.
Not quite, because there are still 3 elements.
Oh, that's right. There's 3 left. I'm sorry. You're right. So officially, this will be done in September. We believe we've met it with the 5 stars based upon all the gap closure data that you saw this evening. But officially, it won't be stamped by the department until it comes out in September. Right now, I'm anticipating that we're at least 4 stars. That's how I've written the goal for benchmark purposes. Once we see the final data that comes out in September, we may revisit this and come back with you as a stretch opportunity to say that we're going to maintain 5 stars. So that's something we will talk about once it's official from the state. Graduation 1, it's met, as Greg had said. So we do have a 5-star rating that was met for our goal for this year. The students in the class of 2024 for the metric associated to the SAT, this data will not be back until late September. We will still analyze this data to determine if we met the goal to be at least 20% higher than the state average, but right now we don't have that data. It comes back later and later each year, which will tie to one of the changes I'm going to suggest on the next slide. The last one, when we transitioned in the school district to go to the SAT, we implemented the PSAT for all 8th graders to basically have opportunities to contribute towards National Merit Commended Scholar opportunities for kids. So because we're an SAT school district, we started administering the PSAT. To me, this is just something that holds us accountable to say we're going to do it. I believe we're going to do it, so I think it's time to change this benchmark goal from a check the box, because that's what that is to me, to something else that shows growth and opportunity to better meet the needs of kids. So for 2024-25, the administration has actively discussed changing benchmark number 4. We still need to be accountable for the graduation component rate of 5 stars on the local report card. I don't believe that changes. That should still be an expectation for us as a school district at large. However, the next 2 metrics related to the SAT and PSAT, although we will continue to do that work, because the data is not readily available until late September, and we're already administering the PSAT in 8th grade, I think there's an opportunity to go back and look at where Greg went on the college career workforce readiness or military readiness component to select 2 of the elements to actually incorporate into this year's goal. The first is in preparation for what's going to happen with the graduation requirements. So graduation requirements will be a future topic we'll be bringing to the board for presentation purposes, but they are transitioning. The class of 2025 has the last eligibility currently associated to the current requirements. In 2026 and beyond, the new requirements take effect. One of the areas that we need to educate about, and although this year's is 47.7% for the number of students in the last cohort that received an honors diploma, the honors diploma requirements are changing. So I believe it's an opportunity for us as a school district to talk to our parents and our students about what constitutes getting the honors diploma. Specifically, that'll be available in the state beginning with 2026 and the change, because there are newer criteria, and actually trying to, through that education process, increase the number of students that could earn it. Now, because they're currently seniors and 3 years are in arrears, there's still some opportunity, but I can't dramatically move the needle for this year's graduating class because they've already done 3 years of the high school and their schedule is already set. We do believe that there's some opportunity that we could help them earn a couple of the other components that they're now eligible to receive if they would choose to go after them to earn an honors diploma as seniors. So that is one of the changes, twofold, to help our current senior class, but at the same time, educate our parents and the underclassmen on the new criteria associated to the honors diploma that will become effective by ODEW. The second, again, goes back to the new requirement for college career workforce readiness or military workforce readiness, specifically related to industry credentials and the pre-apprenticeship program and how it applies to the graduation seal. So, you know, we've been actively working to incorporate career pathways into the school district. We're trying to help students understand that there's different ways to earn the new requirements for graduation seals as part of the graduation requirements. And those do include industry-based credentials or pre-apprenticeship programs. So this is an opportunity to expand on what we're currently doing at the high school to help students understand that they could participate in pre-apprenticeship programs, or they can earn industry-based credentials in addition to the career pathways that we have available at New Albany High School. So Dr. Mamias has worked with Dr. Russell at the high school to talk specifically about this. It is a stretch goal, but I think it, again, gives us an opportunity to educate students and our families about all the opportunities that are available to earn the graduation seals that are now required for graduation requirements. So I think it kind of lays the foundation to pick something specific that will benefit kids in the long term by building the education program and at the same time helping them understand all the options that are available to them, be it college or career, because there are significant elements available within the career pathways. Benchmark number 5, for enhancing school culture and social emotional well-being. So we would administer age-appropriate staff surveys. We did do that last year, and I'm going to be specific on that in just a second. And then implement strategies to engage parents with children enrolled in our school district through coffee and conversation with the Board of Education, which you did do. And then the formation of a citizen advisory for student belonging, which Mrs. Lofton led with Mr. Wilson in our school district. So that benchmark was met. For 2024-25, I'm actually proposing becoming very specific. So I've eliminated I would just say broad terms associated to the introduction of the survey paragraph, and talked about the age-appropriate student, staff, and parent surveys that are going to measure effectiveness of school climate factors in different ways. So for 24-25, based upon the work within the administration over the summer, we confirmed that we want to administer the student belonging survey for grades 1 through 12 that comes out as to support specifically the student belonging and citizen advisory committee recommendations, and the prior student belonging surveys. We have longitudinal data associated to that. The substance abuse survey would continue. We only administer that now in grades 7, 9, and 11, so that we have a cycle to, again, look at longitudinal history and what kids are telling us specifically related to substance usage. It's a natural progression to what we do within the DARE program, to look at both the elementary level and the middle school level, and then the experimentation things that typically start in middle school and high school. And then lastly, the new one that will apply across all 3 areas is student agency. So we are discussing for students doing a student agency survey in grades 6 through 12. Dr. Amias was instrumental in working with the Martha Holden Jennings Foundation. We're actually part of a cohort. We received a grant. So it's New Albany, Bexley, Granville, Upper Arlington, Olentangy, Westerville, Warren Local, Belle Cree are part of a grant through the Martha Holden Jennings Foundation to basically do research to understand the implementation of student agency within your school district, or the level of student agency that's available. And simply put, student agency gives students voice and choice, and looking at how they learn and ultimately what that means to them within the classroom for engagement and motivation. So it's trying to understand from a student lens how they can have voice into the academic environment and choices that become available to demonstrate or participate in the learning process. So we were very fortunate that we were selected to be part of the cohort with Jennings and these wonderful school districts. So that is starting now. Dr. Amias is leading that work in the school district. To specifically look at voice, choice, engagement, motivation, ownership, purpose, and self-efficacy from a student lens. So there's a year of learning that's going to take place, but we need some data to help inform that. So we want student survey data. There will be a staff survey also related to student agency, and then a parent survey. The grant does require parent participation, so we have to attempt to offer them the same survey opportunity to tell us their perspective of how student agency does or does not exist within our school district. So that is one of the surveys that will hit all 3 areas. In addition to that, on the staff side, the student agency survey I talked about, we would still continue the staff climate survey in the spring. It does help inform changes and opportunities within our school district from a student or from a staff perspective. We take it very seriously when we actually unpack that survey in the summertime to understand from a staff perspective what we did well and how we can improve in the school district at large, because they're part of the team. So we value the feedback we received through the staff climate survey. And then on a parent perspective, the only parent survey currently that we're planning for is the student agency survey. Again, as part of the grant from the Martha Holden Jennings Foundation. So those are the surveys. And then in addition to that, in benchmark number 5, we have a piece we're adding based upon the work of the Citizen Advisory for student belonging recommendations. So Mrs. Lofton is currently leading the root cause analysis with our building principals to determine ways to enhance student belonging in our school district is one piece of it. The second piece is there will be a communication coming out to families soon to explain the pilot of one or more elements of a house system in our school district in grades K through 12. There's a lot of learning that has to take place. Some people may remember the house system that existed once upon a time at the high school. Mrs. Ballinger's 2 years into this work at the intermediate school, so she's ahead of it right now, but we will be explaining all this to families, but houses will be returning to the New Albany Plain local schools. Mrs. Lofton's working with the principals on a communication that actually will go out to families soon. But because of that work that we're going to do and how we believe it can impact student belonging specifically to support the recommendations that came out of the advisory, we're incorporating it into the CIP for accountability. The last one in this area is for you as a Board of Education. I have not defined this, so this is your opportunity to help contribute to the CIP directly, but it's to implement strategies to increase parent-community engagement and knowledge of current and future needs of our school district. So clearly, we've been engaged in this work for the last 2 years. We went through the entire process with the city. We did the cooperative strategies work. It led to the campus master plan update. We've done the coffees and conversations, but we have to continue to find ways to engage with our public. So this is one of the areas I'm looking from the board to define what are the strategies and or measures that you would like to see put in place. So I need you to think about that over the course of the next 2 weeks. And then based on my conversation with President Kalinowski, we're going to ask you to circle back to both President Kalinowski or me with that information so that Debbie and I can work on that between tonight and the next board meeting to then come back to you once we have information from other board members. But this is one of the ones that's not defined yet that I need input feedback on based on my conversations with Debbie. Debbie, do you want to add anything to that?
No.
Okay, I stole your thunder. Benchmark number 6, I'm going to let Mrs. Jenkins explain.
So benchmark 6 has been in the CIP for many years, and it is to reduce line 4.5 of our total expenditures of the 5-year forecast by at least 1%. Or greater each year. So what we do is we're looking at what areas, after the budget is set, what areas can we actually reduce in that current year? And to say over 80% of our expenditures are salaries and benefits. So that's gonna be the area that we focus on, because that's where you're gonna get the greatest savings. And those are typically compounding, so it has the bigger impact. But I don't want everyone to think that we're just looking at how can we cut programs and those things. The things that we're looking at are, when we hire, so we always have new FTEs in the 5-year forecast. And when we hire those, I budget at master's plus 4 years salary. That's where they would be placed. But a lot of the times those aren't hired at that master's in 4. So it's less than what we have predicted. Sometimes it's more than that. But a lot of times, Lori does a really good job of looking at what is the highest quality person and then where do they fall. So that's one area where you would reduce the budget because we thought we would hire at master's in 4. Another, Lori also talked about, we brought on 25 new teachers. Those are not all brand new FTEs to the district, they're replacements. And so many times we have a higher level, higher paid position that's leaving. And in most of those instances, we're hiring at a lower placement on a salary schedule. So when we're looking at how are we reducing costs, especially in the salary area, those are the things we're looking at. That's not to say that Michael and his team don't look at, especially at the high school level, when they're looking at scheduling. And if you have a class with 5 or 8 students in it, it doesn't make economic sense to offer that class. And so they get to go to a different class. And that's not like you're cutting a staff member or cutting a program, but you're using your resources more wisely. Other areas that we look at, we have a very active, very high functioning insurance committee. It's Michael, Lori, and I sit on it, as well as 2 representatives from the plea union and 1 from the OC union that are voting members. We have some other members that are other folks that join in the conversation, but very high functioning. It's been in place since before we got here. And when we're looking at our insurance premiums increases, and we'll be doing that at the end of September, we're looking at what were our claims and where is the insurance company really telling us, they're saying this is what your premium increase needs to be. And we always push back on that to say, well, is it really continuing? And we're looking at our high claims and do we think those will drop off? Because claims are really what's driving that increase. There are years when even with that negotiation, the increase is higher than what we have in the 5-year forecast, but a lot of times we're able to get it to at least that or slightly less than. And I think we have some good news this year. We've had several years that have not been good years. So those are the areas that we're trying to find the most impact. Other areas, and you're not going to have quite as much impact to the 5-year forecast, but when we're looking at any kind of purchase that's $10,000 or more, I require 3 quotes. Let's make sure we're getting the best price that we can get for supplies and materials or even services. A lot of the capital, and it's not out of the general fund, but the capital projects that we do around the district in the summer all have to have at least 3 quotes because we want to make sure we're getting the best bang for our buck. We don't always go with the lowest because we need it to be quality work, but we're definitely out getting those. So those are the areas that we're really trying to find savings in. Several years ago, we had an energy audit. And so we're looking at how we reduce our energy costs. Again, not as big of an impact to the 5-year forecast as salary and benefits, but certainly an impact. So we're looking at all of those. So we did meet the benchmark this year by more than the $727,000. I believe it was $1.7 million for all of those reasons that I listed. And we've met this goal every year since it's been in place. So we're recommending that we continue at the 1%, which for next year, based on the May forecast, would be $798,287.
Any questions or comments about benchmark 6 before I go on?
Thanks for that explanation, Becky. It's helpful.
I think the only thing I guess I would say about it is trying to think back to the first year that we did this. And I want to say that the dollar amount was still at least $600,000.
It was 1%. It's
Right.
gone up as the budgets increase in the school district.
Right.
I mean, we're a $100 million business.
Right.
When it's all put together.
Right. Even, I mean, forget the compounding piece of that. 6 or 7 years of this at $600,000 a year, it's a significant amount of money, which, it's kind of like those, it may seem, I mean, this is a big number, don't get me wrong, but, you make those little tiny changes and the ripple effect that it has on the budget and it's one of the reasons, huge reason why we haven't been on the ballot for years for an operating levy, because it's the fiscal responsibility of the district. And I know sometimes I sound like a broken record by saying that, but this is what we're doing. And again, it's not, I really appreciate how you explained it. It's not like you're going in, just like slashing and let's just cut and go down to the complete bare bones. It's just being really smart about all the choices that we're making and making sure that we are getting, the best bang for the buck. And so I appreciate it. I hope, people appreciate it. And I know the number's kind of going up a little bit, but I'm confident that we'll be able to keep doing this.
I really like this goal because, and I say it when I'm talking about the 5-year forecast, you can make changes that are not as impactful to programming and students, but are very impactful to the 5-year forecast. So I like this goal because it keeps us all focused on the current year. And we're not just looking out saying, well, we have a positive ending cash balance at the end of the 5th year, why we're good. I think it's really good to have this goal so that we can continue to just make these smaller changes or be really mindful about how we're implementing some of the additions or turnover so that we can have that impact.
And it's not to impact student program to where Becky went. We're not looking to cut student programs, but there's some things that we have done historically that now have basically resulted in cost savings to the school district. So how we purchase lease agreements for copiers, the fact that we now scan at a copier as an employee in the school district to do secure print. And if you don't scan within 24 hours, the print job is deleted. So you never needed it, it went away.
It's 18 hours.
Or 18 hours. So it used to be 24, now it's 18. So it deletes automatically because, well, you might have sent it to the printer, but you never printed it. So did you really need it? So then the printer gets rid of it for you and you forget about it. That's clicks on a machine and toner and cartridges and paper that we didn't pay for. So those little things have all been put in place over the years, and we keep looking for those opportunities. And again, it's not to diminish or take away from student programming. That's never been the purpose of this goal. It's to find cost savings dominantly in the operational side of the school district when possible, and then the personnel side, because over 80% of our budget are human resources and salary and benefits. So we have to find those small things along the way that can generate towards this. It's work, but I mean, we always go in, like we look at each other and like, okay, can we do this?
I don't want us to think that it's easy because we
It's
have
not.
more than met this goal every year. But in the first year, and I'd have to go back and look, it was far more than what it is today. And so as we get, longer and longer, it's harder and harder to do that.
I think we acknowledged that earlier in the year too, that this gets harder because there's less efficiency to find. And so I just want to make sure we don't get to that point where we're trying to do more and have this excellence with less. There is a tipping point there. And at some point, maybe a different metric. I personally really like the student spending per performance index, that's the ODE graphs. And we're really high on that because we do have really high PI and a pretty efficient for student spending. And so I feel like comparing that to other school districts, to me is a meaningful metric as well, that we're providing the schools and the district with what they need to continue to perform at the level that we're asking them to. And so if like we're not there yet, then, you know, but that we're not just continually like chipping away at some point, is it a time to make sure?
So that could be another example. So again, these are draft. That's the purpose of the next few weeks, is to go through these, unpack them, ask questions, both with President Kalinowski and myself, or members of the team, depending on what it is. So the financial pieces and parts will come to Becky. And then get to a point where we come back in September with, here's the next version, because this is just a draft. To begin the conversation tonight, because that is the point. So you go through a reflection process now. There is an intermediate step that we will meet specifically with staff to get input pursuant to the contractual terms and conditions in the employment contracts. So I have that meeting scheduled in September. President Kalinowski and Mr. Newhoff, as vice president, are present at that meeting to provide input. And then from there, we'll come back to you based upon all the input that Debbie and I receive, and give you the next version at our September 16th board meeting, hopefully for action at that meeting, so that we then can notify the staff by September 30th in accordance with the terms and conditions of their employment.
And we only have one board meeting in September.
Yes. If we don't do it on the 16th, then you will have a special meeting that would have to be scheduled to meet the timeline. There is only one scheduled meeting in September currently. Again, it's a huge celebration, almost like the local report card. We've met the continuous improvement plan goals for what we set out to do. Are there opportunities that we can always be better? Yes, I think that's where we go back to. We try to look at this year, specifically benchmark number 4, and looking at what else we can do to create new measures for accountability purposes that would have an impact in the longitudinal impact to the school district. That's why that's there. But it's hard work, but I think we should be very proud of the work that was done, because I think we do set ambitious goals that try to hold us accountable to demonstrate the outcomes that we would expect. I mean, we have high expectations for our students, but they have the same expectations for us as a district. And I think that's modeled within the continuous improvement plan. We can always be better. Not easy, but we can do it.
That financial goal is kind of an interesting example of like the Ron Clark philosophy of like the compounding effect of doing things 1% better.
Right. That was very good.
I was looking at the teacher.
That was deep, Mrs. Kalinowski. Are there any other questions we can answer about the LRC local report card or the continuous improvement plan? I know it was a lot. Thank you for your patience and endurance to go through it. It's a lot of information. There's a lot of data. We scratched the surface. They will tell you on the other side of the room. They've been mining for weeks and weeks and weeks. This takes a long time to go through every single student and look at information. So we did it at a very high level, but this is unpacked again at the building level and at the teacher level, at the classroom level. So this goes all the way down.
I appreciate what you shared too about the teachers getting together and being vulnerable with each other about who does what well. Because that's a hard thing to do, but everyone benefits from learning from each other.
We're a learning organization. We have to model what we do.
All right. Now for discussion items, beginning with board liaison reports. Do we have any liaison reports this evening?
I'll just go through just so I don't forget it. Finance, I don't have really an update, but our next meeting is October 14th, so just that'll be on our radar for that committee. For policy, nothing currently, but hopefully here at a future meeting, we'll have policies to present.
You've been working on something.
Yeah, so I'll be excited to discuss that at a future meeting. The PTO liaison committee update, Debbie and I and Mr. Sawyers met with the PTO boards from each school, not just the presidents, as we have in the past, but the entire boards were invited. There was a tremendous turnout. And we're able to speak what they need for support for the year and discuss some of the campus master plan, and kind of go through some of that with them. I've gotten great feedback after the meeting. I sent out a survey. I've gotten a handful of responses, but with real thoughtful responses, and a handful of emails as well, thanking us for the opportunity to really hear in detail. They said it's one thing to read the report, but to hear it and walk through it, they really enjoyed that. And so we'll look for opportunities to do things like that here in the future. And then from the levy liaison, Paul and I have a lot of committees apparently, beginning work there, and we'll communicate through nobody.
Can we mention the meeting Tuesday night?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. There's a meeting tomorrow night, 6:30 to 7:30 at the intermediate school community room, to find out more about No Money for Kids in the partnership. And Paul and I will be the board liaisons.
And that's another opportunity as well for folks to come and hear about the campus master plan. So that's tomorrow, 6:30 in the intermediate conference room, which is right inside those doors. So everyone's welcome to come. Thank you, Jen.
Yep.
All right, did you have an update?
I was out of town when the township trustees met last week, and I haven't been able to follow up with the trustees yet to see what happened at that meeting, but we're doing that this week.
Okay, great. All right. Now may I have a motion and a second for board action items A and B, please? And this is the renewal and extension of the contracts for Superintendent Sawyers and Treasurer Jenkins.
So moved.
Mr. McClelland and Ms. Fuller. Before we vote, I would like to take this opportunity to thank Superintendent Sawyers and Treasurer Jenkins for their dedication and commitment to our district and the outstanding results as demonstrated tonight that they continue to deliver for our school community. Your leadership has allowed us to deliver cost savings and demonstrate fiscal responsibility while always prioritizing what's best for kids. So thank you for all you do, and we're thrilled to extend your contracts. Are there any other comments this evening?
I just like to say, I think this is a huge win for the district. Continuity at the superintendent and treasurer CFO position is vitally important for us in meeting the benchmarks that we talked about, in supporting our teachers and staff, in supporting our families, and helping us go through a period of growth that we've identified that institutional knowledge is critical to having, but also having two leaders who are looking strategically at what is best for the district over the next 5 to 10 to 15 years. So, people should be very happy that we've been able to extend their contracts.
You heard it, 15 years, guys.
Okay. Have to talk about that.
All right, with that, Ms. Jenkins, please call the roll.
Mr. McClellan,
Yes.
Ms. Fuller.
Yes.
Mr. Wilson,
Yes.
President Kalinowski.
Yes, and the motion carries. Now may I have a motion and a second for treasurer's item A, please?
So moved.
Second.
Mr. McClellan and Mr. Wilson, Ms. Jenkins.
Thank you. Tonight, because we already did the financials at the last meeting, I just have some appropriation modifications. They are all grants, and so other grants is an increase due to a grant from the Ohio Arts Council for Carnival Animals and donation from Abercrombie Fitch for the Rocks program of $59,150. So there is an income that is associated with the increase in the appropriation. Then we have an increase of $65,714.28 for a school psych intern grant that pays for the interns that we get in that program. And then an increase in Title I due to include the McKinney-Vento grant, which is homeless, for homeless students. It's $11,923.54.
Ms. Jenkins, please call the roll.
Mr. McClellan?
Yes.
Mr. Wilson?
Yes.
Ms. Fuller? Yes. President Kalinowski?
Yes, and the motion carries. Now may I have a motion and a second for superintendent's items A through C, please?
So moved.
Mr. Wilson and Ms. Fuller, Superintendent Sawyers.
Thank you, President Kalinowski, members of the board. Letter A is personnel. So these are the standard employee action items for hiring or acceptance of resignations for the vacancies within the school district so that we can backfill them based upon justified need to support students or programming within the school district itself. They support the terms and conditions outlined by the negotiated agreement. So part of PLE or part of OPSI or the exempt faculty within the school district. We are hiring the EMIS coordinator tonight. That was a resignation for vacancy that Mr. Taylor and Mrs. Lofton have gone through to fill. It's a critical role for us because that is the individual that will work directly with Mr. Taylor to report all of our data to the state. And it's every form of data that exists within the school district. So it's not just student data, it's personnel data, it's food service data, it is data. All the data that goes to the department runs through EMIS. So it's a critical role for us. So we've been fortunate that we're filling the vacancy with a recommendation this evening to begin after Labor Day. Letter B for personnel, I'm just going to call your attention to the school buses. So this reinforces where Becky was going and looking at opportunities for cost savings within the school district. We actively participate in the Meta Bus purchasing program. It goes through the cooperative bid process. All school districts basically submit how many buses do you need based upon the age and capacity of your fleet. It goes out to market, so we get the best price possible buying as a co-op. So it is a cooperative agreement to get that price to come back. So we are recommending the purchase of 2 78-passenger buses to support the current fleet, the aging fleet, and what's going to scrap based upon current condition. We drive them as long as we possibly can. I actually shared that as a factoid with you because I thought you might be interested in seeing it. With the number of buses we have, the actual age of the fleet. Ironically, the 2 buses we're scrapping are not the oldest in the fleet. I think 2014 was a bad year for buses because both of the ones we're sending to scrap are from 2014, not 2007, which is actually our oldest bus on the road. So they were just made differently. Letter C for donations. As always, we're very grateful for all the philanthropic support that we receive. Call your attention to the Abercrombie gifts. So thanks to our work with the New Albany Community Foundation, Abercrombie has agreed to fund the ROCKS program for girls within our school district, Ruling Our Experiences. So they are the sponsor for that. You may remember when we first started, Justice was our sponsor. So all that has since changed. Last year, we did have a different grant resource that was available for that. This year, we went to market and we were actually very successful in finding a community partner that's interested in supporting the well-being of girls, and it is through Abercrombie. So we're very grateful for their participation and their gift to fund that program for our students. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
With none, Ms. Jenkins, please call the roll.
Mr. Wilson?
Yes.
Ms. Fuller? Yes. Mr. McClellan?
Yes.
President Kalinowski?
Yes, and the motion carries. That brings us to adjournment for this evening. May I have a motion and a second to adjourn?
Second.
Mr. McClellan and Mr. Wilson. Ms. Jenkins, please call the roll.
Mr. McClellan?
Yes.
Mr. Wilson?
Yes.
Ms. Fuller? Yes. President Kalinowski?
Yes, and the motion carries. Our next meeting is on September 16th at 5:30 at this location. Thank you.